Welcome to Byte-Sized Tech, where we blend casual conversations with insightful discussions on the latest in technology and gadgets.
Hey, everyone.
This week, we're diving into a few head-scratching situations in data security.
Yeah, quite a few things popping up.
We've got some rumblings about Oracle's cloud, a bankruptcy at 23andMe that's, raising eyebrows about your DNA, and a deeper look at some pretty serious vulnerabilities in the plumbing of the internet, those ingress engines.
It's stuff that makes everything run, basically.
Exactly. It feels like a good time to check if our digital houses are in order, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's a landscape where things can shift really quickly, and staying informed about potential risks, whether it's your personal data or the infrastructure we all rely on, is key.
Yeah.
Let's maybe start by unpacking this Oracle situation first.
Okay, yeah. So this user, Rose A7168, has made some pretty bold claims on breach forums, selling data from 6 million Oracle Cloud users. 6 million.
Wow.
That's not exactly small change. Right?
Not at all. A huge number.
What kind of information are we talking about allegedly being out in the wild?
Well, the claims are quite specific and, frankly, concerning. We're talking about encrypted single sign-on passwords.
Yeah.
Those keys you use to access multiple services with just one login.
Right, the SSO stuff.
Yeah, and also apparently Java key store files and other key files, which are critical for secure communication and authentication.
Okay.
Alleged source, Oracle's regional cloud login servers. If this is accurate, it could give attackers access to a lot of sensitive areas.
Encrypted passwords and key files, even encrypted. That sounds like a major headache waiting to happen.
Definitely. Encryption isn't foolproof forever.
So what did Oracle have to say about all this when it first surfaced? Did they jump right on it?
Initially, they issued a strong denial. This was to Bleeping Computer on March 21st. They stated very clearly, quote, "There has been no breach of Oracle Cloud," end quote, and that the published credentials are not for the Oracle Cloud. They even went as far as to say that no Oracle Cloud customers experienced any data loss. Pretty definitive.
A firm nothing to see here, it sounds like. But the fact that we're still talking about it suggests that might not be the whole story.
Exactly.
How did this alleged attacker, Rose, supposedly even get their foot in the door?
This is where it gets really interesting and perhaps a little worrying for anyone relying on cloud infrastructure. The claim is that Oracle Cloud servers were running a version of software with a known vulnerability, a CVE.
Okay, a known one.
Specifically, a CVE in their cloud server software. Now, what's particularly noteworthy is that this CVE reportedly didn't have a public proof of concept or, exploit readily available.
Oh, really? So no handy guide for hackers to just waltz in?
Nope.
This Rose must have had to figure out the lock themselves, so to speak.
Exactly. It suggests a more sophisticated attacker, someone who can develop their own exploit. And to back up their claims, they even posted what they said was evidence of access, a snapshot from the Wayback Machine showing them uploading a file containing their email to the Oracle Access Manager front end.
Wow.
Think of it as leaving a digital calling card, basically.
A bold move. But I heard that calling card mysteriously vanished shortly after, like poof.
That's right. The initial snapshot was indeed taken down. We can probably guess at whose request, right?
Yeah, you'd think.
However, and this is a crucial detail, it seems this Rose had the foresight to upload a second version, which reportedly is still out there.
Huh. You'd think if you were trying to disprove something, you'd want all the evidence gone.
You would think so.
And the really concerning part is that actual Oracle Cloud customers are supposedly looking at this leaked data and saying, yep, that looks like our stuff.
That's the really significant piece of this puzzle. These user confirmations directly contradict Oracle's initial statements and add a lot of weight to the attacker's claims.
Definitely.
Following this, Oracle seemed to adjust their tune ever so slightly.
Ah, the classic corporate pivot. What did the revised statement sound like? Still denying it outright.
Well, they shifted their narrative. They started claiming that the breach actually occurred on Oracle Classic Cloud rather than the current Oracle Cloud.
Oh, okay. Splitting hairs a bit.
Sort of feels like it. They continued to downplay the overall impact, but the acknowledgement of a breach in some form was a notable change from their initial flat denial.
So it went from no breach anywhere to maybe a little oopsie over here in the classic version, nothing to worry about now. It definitely makes you wonder.
It does.
If you're using any part of the Oracle ecosystem, how does this kind of back and forth make you feel about the security of your data in the cloud?
Yeah.
It certainly highlights the need for ongoing vigilance and maybe not taking initial denials at face value, right?
Precisely. It underscores the importance of transparency and clear communication from providers when these kinds of allegations surface, which isn't always what we get.
True that.
Now, maybe let's switch gears to another area where your personal data is very much in the spotlight. The bankruptcy of 23andMe.
Oh yeah, 23andMe, the folks who tell you if you're like 2% Neanderthal or distantly related to Genghis Khan.
Exactly.
Bankruptcy isn't what you want to hear from a company holding your genetic blueprint. What's the tech angle for us here? Seems more like business news.
Well, the primary concern for the, over 15 million 23andMe customers is what happens to their incredibly sensitive DNA-related data during these Chapter 11 proceedings.
Right, okay.
The company has indicated they're looking to be sold, which means this wealth of genetic information could potentially be transferred to a new owner as part of the deal.
That raises a few red flags, doesn't it? Your genetic code potentially becoming an asset in a bankruptcy sale.
A big red flag for many.
What are 23andMe saying to try and reassure their users? Are they saying anything?
They are. They're pointing to their existing privacy policy as a source of comfort. This policy currently states that they won't sell identifiable genetic data and will only share it with researchers if customers explicitly consent, opt in. It also has a section that specifically addresses bankruptcy or acquisition, stating that these same privacy protections would continue under any new entity.
Okay, that sounds somewhat reassuring on paper, but you're about to hit us with the but, aren't you? I feel a but coming.
You know me too well. There's always a but with privacy policies. The critical thing to understand is that a company's privacy policy isn't like a legally binding contract set in stone.
Right.
It's a statement of current practices and intentions, but it could be changed at any time. So while the current policy offers some assurances, a future owner could, in theory, revise it.
That's a really important point to keep in mind. Promises made today might not be promises kept tomorrow, especially when ownership changes and, well, money gets involved.
Exactly. Buyer intentions can differ.
So for anyone who's sent in their saliva and gotten their ancestry report and who might be feeling a little uneasy right now, what options do they have? Are they stuck?
The most direct control past 23andMe customers have is the option to delete their data from the company's databases.
You can do that.
Yep. This can usually be done through the account settings on their website. If you're concerned about the long-term implications of your genetic information being held by a company undergoing this kind of upheaval, it's definitely something to consider looking into.
Definitely some food for thought there. Delete your digital DNA.
Yeah, wow.
All right, let's move from the complexities of genetic data to the nuts and bolts of internet infrastructure with these ingress engine remote code execution vulnerabilities.
Okay, the RCEs.
We touched on this briefly last time, but the full technical details have now been made public thanks to the research team at Wiz.
Good work by them.
Yeah. For anyone who missed it, what exactly is an RCE vulnerability, again, just quickly, and then let's dive into these specific CVEs.
Sure. So a remote code execution, or RCE, vulnerability is a serious security flaw. It allows an attacker to execute their own code on a target system from a remote location.
So they can basically run programs on your server from anywhere.
Essentially, yes. They can gain control of the system without needing physical access. What's notable here is the sheer number of vulnerabilities discovered, 5 in total, with 4 of them being key to achieving RCE.
4. That does sound like a significant weakness in a core piece of technology like an ingress engine.
It really is. These engines handle a lot of incoming traffic.
Let's try to break these down a bit, starting with CVE 2025-1097. What's the vulnerability there?
Okay, so CVE 2025-1097 centers around something called the OTLS MoxieN annotation. Researchers at Wiz found a flaw in how it validates information.
Validation logic. Okay.
Specifically, due to improper handling of new line characters when checking the common name in a certificate, it was possible to inject arbitrary Nginx configurations.
Huh. New lines. That sounds subtle.
It can be. Think of it like tricking the system into accepting a forged identity by exploiting a loophole in how it checks the ID, specifically how it handles line breaks within that ID.
So a clever way to sneak in commands by exploiting how it verifies a certificate. What about CVE 2025-1098?
That one is described more broadly as a vulnerability in input sanitation. Basically, the system wasn't properly cleaning or checking the data it received.
Like washing its hands before eating?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Which again allowed attackers to inject their own Nginx configuration directives. It's like leaving the door wide open for unwanted instructions because you didn't check who was coming in.
Makes sense. Not being careful about what you're letting in seems to be a recurring theme in security, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
And CVE 2025-24514, that's quite the number.
Yeah, these numbers get long. This vulnerability is an OURL annotation injection flaw, specifically within the Nginx ingress controller's ORC parser.
Okay, another parser issue.
Right. Due to inadequate sanitization of the OURL annotation, an attacker could inject arbitrary Nginx configuration directives through that particular route. Different pathways. Same potential for malicious commands.
So multiple ways to inject these Nginx commands. It's like finding different unlocked windows into the same house.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And finally, CVE 2025-1974. CVE 2025-1974 allowed attackers to bypass path-based restrictions. This means they could get around the intended limitations on what parts of the system they could access.
Like ignoring the keep out signs.
Exactly. And predictably, inject arbitrary Nginx directives once they got past those restrictions. It's like finding a secret passage that bypasses all the security checkpoints.
Okay, so across all these, the underlying issue seems to be the ability to inject these Nginx configurations. That's the common thread. But how does that actually translate into running code remotely? That seems like a jump. What's the magic trick?
This is where it gets really interesting and a bit alarming for anyone managing these systems. Nginx has a feature where configurations can be tested without being immediately applied.
Like a dry run.
Okay, a testing mode.
This functionality can be exploited using something called the SSL engine directive. By injecting a malicious configuration using one of those CVEs we talked about.
Right.
An attacker could potentially trick the SSL engine directive into loading arbitrary shared libraries.
Shared libraries. Those are essentially chunks of code that a program can load and execute as needed, right? Like adding extra functionality on the fly.
Exactly. They're dynamic libraries. And the attack chain that Wiz outlined involves 5 key steps.
Okay, lay it out for us.
First, the attacker uploads their malicious code disguised as a shared library to the pod. They can do this by exploiting a feature in Nginx called the client body buffer.
Okay.
Think of it as sneaking a package onto the system first.
Step 1. Get the malicious package delivered. What happens next? Step 2 is sending a specially crafted admission review request to the Ingress Nginx controller's admission controller. This request contains the injected directive.
The malicious one.
Yes, taking advantage of one of those 4 CVEs we just discussed to slip in the malicious instruction.
And that injected directive is the crucial part that opens the door, like the key.
Precisely. Step 3 is that the injected directive is the SSL engine directive. This tells Nginx, hey, load this specific file as a shared library. The attacker has now laid the groundwork to point it to their malicious payload.
Okay, so they've told Nginx to load something. How do they actually point it to that package they uploaded in step 1?
Step 4 is the clever bit. They specify the procfos path to the file descriptor of their uploaded payload.
Whoa, okay, procfos. That's getting technical.
It is. It's basically a way to reference the file they previously snuck onto the system in a way that Nginx can access and load it using the system's internal file tracking. It's like using an internal mail code to find their package.
Gotcha. An internal address. And the final, not-so-grand finale.
Step 5. If all these steps are successful, the malicious shared library is loaded by Nginx, and the attacker achieves remote code execution. They can now run their own code on the vulnerable system.
Game over.
Pretty much. Game over for security on that system.
That sounds like a seriously sophisticated and potentially devastating attack chain. Wow.
It really is.
It really makes you wonder if anyone running these ingress engines was vulnerable, and even more worryingly, if they saw any actual attacks happening between the time these vulnerabilities were announced and when patches were released.
That's the big question, isn't it? That gap is always the danger zone.
It's definitely something for anyone managing Kubernetes environments to be investigating, like right now.
Absolutely. It highlights the critical importance of not just promptly applying security patches, which is vital,
Yeah.
but also having robust monitoring and threat detection systems in place to identify any suspicious activity that might indicate an attempted exploitation even before a patch is available or applied.
Constant vigilance.
The name of the game.
Well, this has been a pretty eye-opening deep dive into the sometimes unsettling world of data security.
Definitely a lot to digest.
Yeah,
Like,
from potential cloud leaks and vague corporate responses to the implications of your genetic data ending up in bankruptcy court and some truly intricate vulnerabilities in core internet technologies. It's clear that staying informed and vigilant is more important than ever.
Indeed, it's a constant reminder that security in the digital age is an ongoing process, not a, set it and forget it destination.
Never is.
Keeping abreast of these developments is really the first step in protecting ourselves and the systems we rely on.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for tuning in to Bite-Sized Tech. If you found this deep dive insightful or maybe a little scary,
Hopefully more insightful than scary.
hopefully, be sure to let us know in the comments. We always appreciate your feedback. And of course, if you want to stay on top of the latest tech security discussions and more, like, share, and subscribe.
Please do.
We'll catch you next time.